Okay, Maria. She's a national director in the Colombian Libertarian Movement, working in the diverse projects to spread libertarian ideas and gain political relevance. Through her online platform, she advocates for financial freedom and Fintech activism.
Hi everyone. First of all, thank you so much for receiving me, for inviting me, and for making possible a girl from Colombia is here today to talk to you about subsoil privatization and the role of this in the government reduction. So, a little over 4 years ago, I discovered libertarian ideas thanks to one of my undergraduate professors who made me read both Marx and Hayek. In Road to Serfdom, I found the answers to questions I have made long ago. And in the libertarian community, I found not only allies and friends, but also a family. So, when I had to do my degree thesis, I knew I had a chance to deepen my freedom knowledge and make a step. I started my research with another professor that I deeply admire, and the topic was institutions and oil. Little I knew back then that he was a former militant of a communist party in Colombia. Though he was very open to my libertarian ideas, I then realized that liberty has a natural appeal, and that's up to us to make the most of those appealing ideas. So now let me tell you a bit about my country, Colombia. With little over 45 million people, we are known for our diversity, coffee, and sadly recognized for drug cartels. As you may have guessed, our main exports are mainly related to raw materials. Mineral products represent 55% of total exports, where 28% adds for crude oil. And this income, plus the taxes generated over it, are a primary source of financing for the government and welfare state. Because if you didn't know, the subsoil in Colombia is owned by the state, and so if the government were to find oil, he's in the obligation to exploit these resources for the sake of the population. So if they find oil on your property is no longer yours. And this represents a problem that us libertarians cannot overlook. When talking about oil, it's also inevitable to deny the importance that has in the Colombian economic spectrum, also in the Latinamerican spectrum, especially with regards of public finances. During the last decade, oil was one of the main sources of income of the Colombian government. Generating institutional dynamics that have formed the sector that we know today. Nevertheless, since 2014, as you may have known, the oil sector in Colombia has been increases, putting the national government in a difficult position to navigate, considering the different factors which oil production affects, as monetary exchange, fiscal policies, and foreign trade. The reduction of perceived income raises the question if the institution dynamics that we have today are adequate, and if they're generated not only income, but wealth for the parties involved, and of course for individuals. So, all habits die hard. Today's world is moved by petroleum being a sector of vital importance for economic and giving its status of natural resource. It is no coincidence that the administration is in the hands of the state, and therefore in the institutions that represent it since colonial times in the Americas to the present day. To understand the actual law that we have today, it's important to go all the way back to the Spanish colony. By 1536, it marks the beginning of the law over the property rights in Colombia. The function of subsoil control is inherited from the Indian law right that was part of the Castilian right applicable to the Americas. The Indian right in the matter of mining includes an absolute reserve of property of the subsoil. The property of the subsoil is of the king, and the king of Spain was the owner of everything found on the subsoil in the Americas. So it's no coincidence that after 500 years of being considered a colony, Colombia retained this role in its government at the head of the national agencies, to such extent that the payment of the oil tax is known as royalties, regalías in Spanish, and in the colonial times these were corresponded to the payment of the 5th royal mining operation in Hispanoamerica, which was paid, of course, to the kings as a compensation for the use of the oil and the subsoil. And on the other hand, we cannot forget that the main elements that are found on the soil are not only fiscal, but of absolute necessity for the defense and security of nations, or at least that's the way a colony used to think, and our governments think nowadays. So the state, in its sovereign capacity, is the owner of such fiscal goods, and likewise its main function is to collect taxes and, of course, pay royalties. Because back then it was not only about oil, but it was also about gold, silver, and all of these elements. So a few years ahead, between 1949 and 1969, we had a period in which we had a fairly better system. Concessions had many capitalists interest in them and came together, but due to the degree of government of the government at the time, international companies were very frightened that they're going to get expropriated, so they decided to cancel all operations. And during this period of time, Colombia was the 8th producer of oil in the world, thanks to the concession of mares and barco. Okay, so now to our modern constitution. The constitution that we have nowadays in Colombia was written in 1991 in a very turbulent period. Many interests of different political parties came together to form this constitution. And this constitution created many articles related to the subsoil and the ownership of the state, and created these agencies that you're seeing in there, Treasury and Ministry of Mines. The Treasury has its main function to direct the financial administration of the national government and propose economic policies. In its sense, it's in charge of the management of royalties and rents generated by the exploitation of petroleum, and of ensuring the greater good and the greater use of said rents for the national territory. Not that being enough, they created the Ministry of Mines that's responsible for managing the non-renewable resources, natural resources of the country, to ensure the supply and protection of them. I'm quoting so much because this is taken from their official webpage. And in line with these guidelines, the ministry is also responsible for planning, regulating, and formulating the exploitation and exploration policy. So it has a complete control over the industry. Not this being enough, they created the National Hydrocarbon Agency that is in charge of administrating and regulating what ministers are there telling that should be done with the resources, as well as establishing the terms of the contracts of exploitation. And finally, Ecopetrol, it's the national company for commercial industrial activities corresponding to or related to the exploration, refining, transportation, storage, distribution, and marketing of hydrocarbons and their derivative products. So they cover every bit of it. So it can be said that Ecopetrol, he dedicates specifically to the industry, while all of these other agencies tell Ecopetrol what to do and to whom it can be done. And, well, all of this is possible because of our constitution, so I wanted to show you. So the first Article 80, the state shall plan the management and use of natural resources to ensure their sustainable development, conservation, restoration, or replacement. As I was saying, there's 4 main articles. This is the first one that says that the state is the owner of everything. That's next article. The state owns the subsoil and the non-renewable resources without prejudice to the rights acquired and perfected according to the pre-existing laws. So they're very completely protected on those. And there's 2 more in which they create the framework of fiscal sustainability, saying that everything that you get from those non-renewable resources is at the hand of the state, and the state decides what to do or not to do with that money. So as you can see, it's a system that is all created to perpetuate and to extract as much wealth as possible, and to capture it by the hands of the state. So when you visit many municipalities that are producers, you don't see much wealth, because the government agencies believe that the wealthiness created in these municipalities needs to be redistributed among the rest of the country, but the reality is that most of this money is captured at the hands of corrupt functionaries. Next. So, is this industry too big to fail? For a few years, the price of oil was increasing, and in a certain way, it was hitting the flaws of government agencies. During this period, the government had a big check to spend, and spend, and to create more subsidies and to keep on growing. So the consequent fall in the price of oil brought us a tax reform to aid the income that the government was no longer receiving. And this decrease in income is beginning to show the weakness of the institutions that revolve around the industry. And one of the main ones is that oil is a very big industry to fail. So, the Colombian institutes of the oil sector are about to be irrelevant. They are already inefficient, and they're not growing returns for the government regarding this industry. The institutional framework, in this sense, it has deeply failed. It has enormously failed to Colombians, and there's no evidence that the government owning the subsoil and extracting is increasing social efficiency. In 2015, CEPAL predicted that the countries that will receive a bigger impact from a drop on oil prices will be Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador, because of our systems and the welfare state that we're trying to keep up. So that means more taxes, and that means more debt for governments. And I wanted to give you a few facts. Our Index Transparency International, we're number 36 over 100 countries. And in Economic Freedom Index, we're a moderately free country, so there's still so much to accomplish. So one of the pillars for an institution to be successful is the degree of defense on property rights of those who have power over a certain asset, as well as ensuring that that this right can be exercised without great difficulty. So the ownership of oil by the state generates certain setbacks in the terms of compliance with these property rights, which in return present a situation similar to the problem of the common. So when you talk about privatizing subsoil and privatizing oil and petroleum mines, they tell you, hey, think about the environment. And I tell them, I'm thinking about the environment because what is of no one will care for it. And that's what's happening in Colombia with our diverse environment and diversity, is that because there are no property rights over these lands that have mines, then no one will look after them, and they end degenerating. For example, there was guerrilla attack on an oil tube. They put a bomb on it and it ended up contaminating a river. That was government, so no one cared for it and no one went there to fix the problem and to prevent for that happening again. So this dilemma of the common is very important in this case when we are defending environmental care as well as property rights. And another important thing to see is decentralization of the economy is intimately related to the decentralization of politics. The state generates a whole series of very harmful peripheral distorting effects. Promotion of irresponsibility, because the state doesn't know the real cause of its intervention, then it acts irresponsibly. Corruption of the traditional concept of law and justice, they are replaced by those of mandate of social justice. Mimetic corruption of individual behavior that becomes increasingly aggressive and respect less moral and respect less the laws. This was said by Huerta de Soto in 2007, and is still very up to the date. So, what I meant by decentralization is that we should take the tools that we have right now, that's why I have a Bitcoin picture there, to emulate blockchain property rights. To have rights and respect of private properties. Through blockchain, maybe we have a way out to have people taking the ownership of their lands. So I wanted to bring a couple of examples related to the environmental care and technology property rights, given that today's theme of the conference is entrepreneurship. These two companies are disrupting the sector in Colombia. They're companies from Medellin. The first one is called SHI. They're engineering in hydrology. And they have very clear the thing about property rights and the dilemma of the commons. They try to find a way to extract without being harmful to the environment. And GeoModel, it's a geological 3D model so that you can actually know what not only like the playing field of your property looks like, but also under it and over it and all of the sides. So this adds to a blockchain to create property rights that are very well blinded of government rigged. So, what is the legitimate property of the state over the individuals? Where is it written, this implicit contract that demands the governments have the function of coordinate and administrate natural resources? And this is an important cause to determine how we interact with other nations. Because how many conflicts can you name that involve oil control as a main trigger? Because it's at the hands of government interested of an agenda. And to be honest, as you know, Colombia has been living in conflict for over 60 years. So the day-to-day Colombia don't like conflict because we grew up between conflict and violence, and we're willing to do anything to avoid conflict. and even sign a peace treaty that doesn't make justice to victims, just in the name of no more violence or no more conflict. So many don't like to question the government because that will be a conflict with the government. And a left tendency is growing and growing, especially in my generation, millennial. And sadly, many millennials in Colombia think that just by voting to the guy that will do right for them, they're doing enough. But it's not enough. We ought to do more. So I have to say myself that being libertarian, of course, I don't like conflict. But we have to fight this accommodating feeling because our love for freedom and our love for freedom is greater than this fear of conflict. And I make this question myself every day: is Colombia still free enough? And I think this is a good way to start answering that. So I want to tell you that I went from writing these thoughts and this thesis isolated from the general public, for saying so. And I'm here in front of you making a case for it. I'm making a case in Colombia for it. And the thing is that not many have questioned the role of privatization of subsoil in Latin America because we don't want to deal with the consequences of having that conflict within a government. So, to say that it's morally wrong to expect that the government to take care of the environment and at the same time, for the very selfless reason to provide citizens with good conditional health is just not something that I'm willing to do. And by stepping up and demanding that the subsoil must be privatized, we are up against this immense machinery telling everyone that we are wrong, because we are not. That we are selfish, that we don't care about the poor or the environment, that we just care about these chronic capitalists and because we want to make the richer richer and the poor poor. Because government keeps getting bigger and bigger and it gets greedier as the time passes and we don't make a stand. So I don't want to be alone in this fight. And that's why Colombia needs all of you, needs all of your experience to make a stand and help us navigate through your experience. I'm not trying to pose here as an expert, I'm still on the making. And as you can see, this is just a profiling of a major issue in Colombia and Latin America. And I'm here to tell you that Colombia needs support to involve this issue with real libertarian proposals beyond mantras. I'm here to invite you to come to Colombia and help us sort this out. Because this is not the only issue. This is an issue that I keep very close to my heart. But it's a good way to start. So how do we give people back some independence, some freedom? It's by taking the state's biggest resource of income, oil. So they don't have an option but to shrink down. But can not only we show them the way to do this, we have to make them the real transition and the real solutions and to go through that transition. And that's why I hope, and that's why I need you to keep on teaching us and to keep making these amazing events. Thank you.